My husband locked me outside in the rain. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. And right then, I knew my life was never, ever gonna be the same. Rain wasn't just a drizzle. It was a cold, angry storm, the kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds. I stood there on the porch of our perfect, beautiful home, the one I thought we'd built together, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. My fists were pounding against the solid oak door, the wood so expensive Mark had boasted about it for weeks. "Chloe, stop it." His voice came through the door, muffled but sharp like a shard of glass. "You're making a scene. The neighbors are gonna hear." My heart just shattered. Making a scene, I was his wife. And he had just locked me out in a thunderstorm because I'd accidentally spilled wine on his new rug. A stupid, overpriced rug. I stopped pounding. My hands were already red and numb. I leaned my forehead against the cold, wet door, and the tears I'd been holding back started mixing with the rain on my face. "Mark, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Please, just let me in. It was an accident. I'm sorry." Silence. The only answer was the drumming of the rain on the roof and the distant rumble of thunder. I couldn't believe it. This was Mark, the man who'd held my hand on our first date and told me I had the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen. The man who'd promised to protect me, to cherish me. We met in college. I was an art student, always covered in a little bit of paint, and he was in the business program, always so clean-cut and ambitious. He was my opposite, and I loved it. He felt so steady, so sure of himself. He said he loved my free spirit. He'd come to my little studio apartment and watch me paint for hours, telling me I was a genius. "One day, Chloe," he'd said, "I'm gonna buy you a house with a huge studio, a room filled with nothing but sunlight for you and your canvases." And he did, or I thought he did. After we got married, his career took off. He was making big deals, climbing the corporate ladder so fast it made my head spin. I was so proud of him. I was working part-time at a local art gallery, but Mark said my little salary was barely worth the gas money. He suggested I quit and focus on my art, on making our new house a home. "I've got this, honey," he'd said, puffing out his chest a little. "You don't have to worry about a thing." It sounded so romantic at the time. A dream come true. So I quit my job. I packed up my paints, and we moved into this huge, gorgeous house in a gated community. The house had a room with perfect sunlight, just like he'd promised. But somehow, I never got around to setting up my easel. There were always errands to run for Mark, dinners to plan for his clients, and his endless list of expectations for how the perfect home should be kept. My paints stayed in their boxes, gathering dust in the garage. My free spirit, the one he said he loved, he started trying to tame it. My colorful clothes became too loud. My friends from the art world were a little weird. He'd correct me in front of his new, polished friends, smiling while he did it. "Chloe's such an artist, you know, head in the clouds." And everyone would laugh, a light, polite laugh, but it felt like a slap every single time. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller to fit into the perfect little box he was building for me. I told myself this was just what marriage was, a compromise. I told myself he loved me, but I had no idea what was really coming. I thought things were good, or at least good enough, until tonight. Shivering on the porch, my thin dress clinging to my skin, I tried the door handle one more time. Locked. Solid. I slid down the wall, my back against the rough brick, and sat on the cold, wet concrete. My phone was inside on the kitchen counter. My car keys were in my purse, also inside. I was trapped. I was completely and utterly alone. My mind raced, trying to understand how we got here. How the man who promised me a sunlit studio could leave me shivering in a dark storm. The argument had been so small. We were having dinner, just the two of us. I was telling him about a new painting idea I had, the first one that had excited me in months. He wasn't listening. He was scrolling on his phone, nodding, saying, "That's great, honey." To get his attention, I gestured with my hand, and my wine glass tipped over. Red wine bled across the corner of the new, cream-colored rug. Exploded. It wasn't just anger, it was a kind of cold, terrifying rage I'd only seen glimpses of before. "Do you know how much that cost, Chloe?" he'd yelled, his face turning a dark shade of red. "Do you have any idea? You are so careless. All you do is cost me money." I started to cry, apologizing over and over, trying to clean it up. But he just grabbed my arm. "Get out," he said, his voice dangerously low. I thought he was kidding. "What?" I asked, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "Mark, don't be silly. I'll clean it." He didn't smile. He dragged me to the front door, pulled it open, and shoved me outside. "You can come back in when you learn to respect my things," he said, and then he slammed the door and locked it. Click. So there I was, huddled on the porch, feeling more foolish and humiliated than I ever had in my life. The wind whipped the rain into my face, and I started to feel a deep, bone-aching cold. How long was he going to leave me out here? An hour? All night? The thought sent a new wave of panic through me. I wrapped my arms around my knees, trying to make myself as small as possible. Every car that drove by on the distant street made my heart leap, hoping it was someone who could help, but we were so far back from the main road, hidden by trees. No one could see me. That was the point of a gated community, right? Privacy, anonymity. Tonight, it felt like a prison. I thought about my family. My parents had passed away a few years ago in a car accident, a pain that was still a raw, tender spot in my heart. My only living relative was my grandma, Alina. My dad's mom. She was complicated. She was a strong, fiercely independent woman who had built her own real estate empire from the ground up. She was tough as nails, and she had never really liked Mark. She'd been polite, of course, but I always saw a flicker of disapproval in her eyes. "He's too smooth, Chloe," she'd told me once before the wedding. "Men who are that smooth are usually hiding something rough underneath." I'd brushed it off. "You're just being protective, Grandma," I said, kissing her cheek. "Mark is wonderful." We hadn't spoken much in the last year. After a small argument where she'd called Mark a well-dressed parasite, I had pulled away, hurt that she couldn't see the man I saw. Now, sitting in the rain, her words echoed in my head. A well-dressed parasite. Was she right? The thought was terrifying. Had I been blind this whole time? Had I given up my art, my friends, my entire self for a lie? The cold was becoming unbearable. My teeth were chattering so hard my jaw ached. I felt my body starting to go numb, a dangerous, sleepy kind of numbness. I'm going to get sick, I thought. He's going to leave his wife outside to get pneumonia over a rug. The cruelty of it was so immense, so out of proportion that my brain could barely process it. This wasn't a punishment. This was torture. It was a power play. He was showing me exactly how little I meant to him. I was just another one of his things, and because I had damaged another one of his things, I was being discarded. That was the first real emotional turn for me. The moment the love I thought I had for him started to curdle into something else. It wasn't just sadness or fear anymore. It was a flicker of anger. A tiny, hot flame in the middle of my freezing cold chest. How dare he? How dare he treat me like this? The shock of the situation was starting to wear off, replaced by a slow, rising tension. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman who was starting to wake up. I pushed myself up, my legs stiff and weak. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to decide I was worthy of shelter. I stumbled around the side of the house, my bare feet sinking into the muddy flower beds I had so carefully planted. The windows were all dark, except for the faint blue glow of the television in the living room. I crept closer, peering through the glass, and what I saw broke my heart all over again. Mark was on the couch. He was leaning back, his feet propped up on the coffee table, a bowl of popcorn in his lap. He was watching a movie, completely relaxed. He wasn't packing by the door, worried. He wasn't regretting his actions. He was fine. He had thrown me out into a storm and was now enjoying a movie night. I felt the anger inside me flare brighter. He didn't care. He truly did not care if I was safe or warm or alive. I tapped on the window, just a light tap. His head didn't move. I tapped again, harder this time. "Mark!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. His head snapped in my direction. For a second, I saw surprise on his face, then it hardened into annoyance. He stood up and walked to the window. He didn't open it. He just stood there, looking at me through the glass. The rain was pouring down between us. "Go away, Chloe," he mouthed, his expression cold as stone. "You're ruining my movie." He then reached over and closed the curtains, plunging the window into darkness. And I was alone again in the rain and the mud. The anger I felt was so hot it almost felt warm. It was a righteous fury that burned away the last of my foolish, misplaced love. The man I married was gone. Maybe he never even existed in the first place. I had to get away. I had to get help. But how? My mind was foggy from the cold. I started to feel dizzy. I stumbled back toward the front of the house, my only thought to get to the street, to flag someone down. I wasn't sure I could even make it that far. My body was shaking uncontrollably now. I felt weaker than I ever had in my life. I was about to give up, to just collapse right there on the perfectly manicured lawn. But then, something I never expected happened. Two bright headlights cut through the pouring rain, turning into our long, winding driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? One of Mark's clients. A neighbor finally noticing the commotion. The car was sleek and black, a model I didn't recognize, but it looked expensive. It drove slowly, cautiously up the driveway and came to a stop right in front of the porch where I was standing, trembling like a leaf. I froze, caught in the glare of the headlights like a deer. I couldn't move, I couldn't think. I just watched as the driver's side door opened. An umbrella, big and black, popped open first. Then a small, elegant figure stepped out of the car and into the storm. She was holding the umbrella high, and as she walked toward me, the light from the porch caught her face. My breath caught in my chest. I couldn't believe it. It was my grandma, Eleanor. She rushed over to me, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "Chloe, my God, what on earth are you doing out here? What happened?" She tried to wrap her coat around my shoulders, her hands warm against my icy skin. I couldn't speak. I just pointed a shaking finger at the front door. He locked me out. I finally managed to choke out, the words feeling like ice shards in my throat. Eleanor's eyes followed my finger to the door, then back to my drenched, shivering body. I saw the confusion on her face melt away, replaced by a slow-dawning horror, and then something else. An expression I had never seen on her before. It was a cold, quiet, calculating fury. It was the look of a woman who had just seen her most precious treasure desecrated. She looked at me, trembling and soaked to the bone. She looked at the big, beautiful house, dark and silent except for the faint glow of the TV inside. She looked back at me, and her gaze hardened into something as solid and unyielding as diamond. She took a deep breath, and her voice, when she spoke, was calm, steady, and absolutely lethal. She looked at the house, our dream home, and said the two words that changed everything. "Destroy it." I just stared at her, my mind unable to process what she'd just said. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Grandma, what are you talking about?" She didn't look at me. Her eyes were still locked on the house, burning with an intensity that scared me a little. "I said," she repeated, her voice like steel, "destroy it." She finally turned to me, her expression softening just a fraction as she took in my pathetic state. "But first, let's get you out of this rain." She guided me, stumbling and weak, to her car. The inside was warm and dry, smelling of leather and a faint, expensive perfume. She cranked up the heat, and the blast of warm air felt like heaven. She took off her own dry cashmere coat and wrapped it around me, ignoring my protests. "Don't be silly, child," she said, her voice gentle now. "You're half frozen." I sank into the plush leather seat, my body shaking with a mixture of cold and shock. "Grandma," I said, my teeth still chattering. "I don't understand. What do you mean, destroy it? The house?" She put the car in reverse and started backing down the long driveway. She didn't even glance back at the house. "Chloe, there's something I should have told you a long time ago," she said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I tried to in my own way, but you were so in love. I didn't want to break your heart." My own heart was pounding in my ears. "Tell me what?" She took a deep breath. "The money for this house," she said slowly, deliberately. "Where do you think it came from?" I frowned, confused by the question. It came from Mark. From his bonuses, his investments. He worked so hard for it, he was so proud. Eleanor let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, he was proud, all right, proud of how clever he was." She pulled out onto the main road, leaving the gated community behind us. "Chloe, honey, Mark didn't have that kind of money, not then. His bonuses were good, but they weren't buy a mansion in cash good." I felt a cold dread creeping back into my veins, a dread that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then, "Where did it come from?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. This is where the big twist landed, the one that rewrote my entire marriage. "It came from you, Chloe," she said softly. "It came from the trust your grandfather and I set up for you when you were born. It was meant for your future, for you to start a business, to travel the world, to have security. It wasn't meant to buy a spoiled brat a palace so he could feel like a king." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible. I would know. I would have had to sign something." "And you did," Eleanor said, her voice laced with sadness. "Don't you remember, right after you got married, Mark came to you with a stack of papers. He said it was for estate planning, for investment strategies. He said it was complicated financial stuff and that you shouldn't worry your pretty little head about it. He just needed your signature to consolidate your assets. Don't you remember?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. I did remember. I was in the kitchen, trying a new recipe. Mark had come in, waving a thick folder, looking so serious and important. He'd flipped through pages filled with jargon I didn't understand. pointed to a dozen little tabs that said sign here. It's just to make our financial future more secure, baby, he'd said, smiling that charming smile of his. It puts everything in one neat little package. It's smarter for taxes. And I, trusting my husband, had signed every single one without reading them. I felt sick. What did I sign? You signed over power of attorney for your financial trust, Alina said grimly. You gave him complete control. He liquidated the entire thing, every last penny your grandfather and I saved for you, and used it to buy that house. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. And then my dear, clever husband put the deed solely in his name. For liability reasons, I'm sure he told you. My mind flashed back to another conversation. Mark, casual, leaning against the counter. It's just cleaner this way legally, honey. With my job, all the deals I do, it protects us if the house is just in my name. Don't you trust me? And I had said yes. Of course I trust you. The pieces all clicked into place, forming a picture so ugly and so painful I could barely look at it. The house wasn't ours. It was mine. The life he paraded, the wealth he flaunted, it was all built on my inheritance. He hadn't just controlled me emotionally, he had robbed me. He had stripped me of my past and my future, all while making me feel like I was the one who was worthless, the one who was a financial drain. The parasite wasn't my art or my friends or my carelessness. The parasite was Mark. Grandma was right all along. The tears started again, but they were different this time. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. All those times he'd belittled me for buying a new dress. All those times he'd sighed about the cost of groceries. All those times he made me feel small and dependent. He was doing it with my own money. I froze. I just sat there in the passenger seat of my grandma's car, the heater blasting on my numb skin, but the cold I felt was deep inside me. It was the icy chill of betrayal. The man I loved hadn't just locked me out of a house. He had locked me out of my own life, and I had handed him the key. What he said next changed everything, is what you'd say in a story, but for me, it was what my grandma had just revealed. It changed my past, my present, and my future in a single, devastating moment. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the swish of the windshield wipers and my own ragged breathing. Finally, we pulled into the underground garage of a glittering high-rise building downtown. Where are we? I asked, my voice hoarse. My city apartment, Alina said, parking the car. You're staying with me. We have work to do. The reversal had begun. The moment we stepped into her penthouse apartment, it was like stepping into another world. It was elegant and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. It was a world of power, of control. A world Mark had tried to imitate, but had only managed to create a cheap copy of. Alina immediately went into action. She ran a hot bath for me, filled with oils that smelled like lavender and chamomile. She laid out a soft, fluffy robe and a set of new pajamas on the bed in the guest room. While I soaked in the tub, trying to scrub away the cold and the humiliation, I could hear her in the other room, her voice low and firm on the phone. David, it's Alina. I need you. Wake up your team. We have a situation. David was her lawyer, her pit bull, as she sometimes called him. When I got out of the bath, feeling human for the first time in hours, Alina handed me a warm mug of tea. David is meeting us at his office at 9 a.m. sharp, she said, her face set. Bring the clothes you were wearing. They are evidence. The thought of facing Mark, of fighting him, was terrifying. A part of me still wanted to curl up in a ball and disappear. Grandma, I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. She sat down next to me on the bed and took my hand. Her hand was small and delicate, but her grip was like iron. Chloe, she said, looking me straight in the eye. That boy didn't just disrespect you. He committed fraud. He stole from you. He humiliated you. He left you for dead in a storm. There is no, I don't know if I can. There is only I will. You are my granddaughter. You are not weak. You just forgot how strong you are, and tomorrow we are going to remind him. Her words were like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. The fear didn't disappear, but for the first time it was smaller than my anger. My confidence started to rise. I wasn't the shivering, pathetic creature on the porch anymore. I was Chloe, the artist. I was Chloe, the granddaughter of Alina Vance, and I was about to take my life back. The next morning, I put on a suit my grandma had laid out for me. It fit perfectly. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman looking back at me wasn't a victim. She was a fighter. When we walked into the lawyer's office, a team was already assembled. David, a sharp man with kind eyes, greeted us. Alina, Chloe, I've reviewed the documents Alina faxed over last night. It's egregious. But it's also airtight. He left a paper trail a mile long. The payback was beginning, and it wasn't going to be soft. It was going to be legal, it was going to be precise, and it was going to be devastating. So what happens now? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. David smiled a grim smile. Now we get everything back. My phone, which Alina had sent a courier to retrieve from a friend's house where I kept a spare, had been buzzing nonstop. Dozens of texts and missed calls from Mark. The first few were angry. Where are you? You think running off is going to solve anything? Then they turned to feigned concern. Chloe, I'm worried. Are you okay? I'm sorry, I just lost my temper. The last few were panicked. Chloe, please answer me. I love you. Please come home. Home. The word felt like acid in my mouth. David, the lawyer, looked at me. The first step is a restraining order, and we file for an immediate freeze of all his assets pending the fraud investigation. That includes every bank account and the house itself. My heart hammered in my chest. Freeze his assets, all of them. All of them, Alina confirmed, her voice cold. He used your money to build his kingdom. It's time to cut off the power. And so the papers were filed. That afternoon, a process server arrived at the house. I wasn't there, but Alina's security guy, who was parked down the street, described the scene to her over the phone. Mark answered the door in his golf attire, looking annoyed. When he was served the papers, his face went from irritation to confusion, then to pure, white-hot rage. He tried to slam the door, but the server was already walking away. His kingdom was under siege. His credit cards were declined at the golf club. His bank accounts were frozen solid. The perfect life he had built, the life he had stolen from me, was beginning to crumble. The real payback had begun. The satisfaction I felt was sharp, clean, and overwhelming. The first call came while I was drinking my tea. His name flashed on the screen, Mark. My hand trembled and I almost dropped the phone. Alina put her hand over mine. Let it go to voicemail, she said calmly. Let him talk to a machine, that's all he deserves right now. So I did. The voicemail message that followed was exactly what I expected. It wasn't an apology. It was pure, unfiltered rage. Chloe, what the hell did you do? My cards are being declined. My accounts are frozen. What is this? Some kind of sick joke? You call me back right now. The venom in his voice was chilling, but hearing it from the safety of my grandma's apartment, it sounded different. It sounded weak. It was the sound of a bully who had just had his favorite toy taken away. A few hours later, another voicemail. This time, his tone had shifted. It was a wheedling, manipulative voice I knew all too well. Chloe, baby, listen. I'm sorry about the other night. I was stressed. I had a bad day at work. I never should have locked you out. But this is crazy. You have to call them and tell them it's a mistake. We can fix this. I love you. I love you. 3 words he had used like a weapon for years. He'd used them to get me to quit my job, to isolate me from my friends, to make me sign those papers. Hearing them now just made me feel cold. He's predictable, Alina said, sipping her own tea as we listened to the message on speakerphone. First rage, then fake remorse. Next will come the begging, and after that, the threats. A cornered rat always follows the same pattern. She was right. The calls and texts kept coming, a barrage of desperation. But with David the lawyer's guidance and my grandma's unwavering support, I didn't answer a single one. I was building a wall around myself, brick by legal brick. The restraining order meant he couldn't come near the apartment building. The asset freeze meant he couldn't use my money to hire a fancy lawyer. For the first time in years, I had the power. I had the control. But I knew this was just the beginning. I thought winning the legal battle would be the hardest part, but I had no idea what was really coming for me. A few days later, David called. Mark has agreed to a settlement meeting, he said. He's waived the standard waiting period. He's desperate. He wants to see you. My stomach plummeted. See him in person? I don't have to, do I? I asked, my voice small. No, David said gently. You don't. We can handle everything, but he paused. Sometimes looking your opponent in the eye is the final step to getting your power back. It's your call, Chloe. I looked at my grandma. She didn't say a word. She just gave me a small, confident nod. It was all the encouragement I needed. Okay, I said, my voice stronger. I'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Mark's face. The charming smile, the angry sneer, the cold look in his eyes when he closed the curtains on me. I was terrified that as soon as I saw him, I would crumble, that all this newfound strength would just evaporate and I'd be that shivering girl on the porch again. The next morning, I felt a strange pull. Grandma, I said, Before the meeting, there's something I need to do. I need to go back to the house. She raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? I need to get my things, I said. My real things. She understood immediately. David arranged for a police escort as per the restraining order to ensure Mark was not on the property. When we pulled up that long driveway, my heart was pounding. The house looked the same. Perfect, imposing, beautiful. But now when I looked at it, I didn't see a dream home. I saw a cage. A beautifully decorated prison built with my own money. We walked inside, the police officers waiting discreetly by the door. The house was cold and silent. The first thing I saw was the faint stain on the cream-colored rug, the ghost of the spilled wine. I just stared at it for a moment. Such a small, stupid thing to have triggered the end of my world and the beginning of my new one. I walked past it, ignoring the expensive furniture and the perfectly placed decor. I didn't want any of it. It was all tainted. I went straight to the garage, and there they were, tucked away in a dusty corner, a stack of cardboard boxes, my paints, my canvases, my brushes and charcoal sticks, my whole artistic soul packed away and forgotten. I ran my hand over the top box, a layer of dust coming away on my fingers, and I started to cry. But these weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of grief. Grief for the years I had lost, for the artist I had silenced inside me. My grandma came up behind me and put her arms around me. It's okay, honey, she whispered. She's still in there, she was just waiting for you. I nodded, wiping my tears. I know, I said. It's time to let her out. We loaded the boxes into my grandma's car. As I was about to leave, I took one last look around. On the kitchen counter was a framed photo of me and Mark on our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope. I looked at the smiling girl in the picture, the girl who trusted so easily, who loved so completely. I felt a pang of sadness for her. But then I picked up the frame, looked at Mark's smiling face, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty distance. I took the photo out of the frame, tore it neatly in half, and dropped it in the trash. I left the empty frame on the counter. It was a message. We were over, utterly and completely. The settlement meeting was in a sterile conference room at David's firm. I walked in with my grandma and David on either side of me. I felt like I had an army with me. Mark was already there, sitting across the long, polished table with a young, nervous-looking lawyer. When Mark saw me, his face changed. He stood up, a desperate, charming smile plastered on his face. "Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You look beautiful." I didn't say a word. I just sat down and looked at him, my expression unreadable. I felt strangely calm. Seeing him now in this context, stripped of his power, he didn't look like a monster. He just looked small, pathetic. "Let's get straight to the point," David said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "My client, Chloe, is the sole beneficiary of the Aliner Vance Trust, a trust which you, Mr. Hayes, illegally accessed and liquidated via fraudulent means. The evidence is irrefutable. We have the papers you had her sign under false pretenses. We have the bank records showing the transfer of funds. We have the deed to the house, which you purchased with her money and put solely in your name. To be blunt, you are facing grand larceny and fraud charges, which carry a significant prison sentence." Mark's smile vanished. He looked at his lawyer, who just shook his head slightly as if to say he's right. Mark turned back to me, his eyes wide with panic. "Chloe, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "It wasn't like that. I was investing it for us. For our future, I was gonna tell you, I swear." I just looked at him. The lies were so practiced, so easy for him. "Were you going to tell me when you locked me out in a thunderstorm, Mark?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear. Whole room fell silent. "Were you investing for us when you were watching a movie while your wife was developing hypothermia on the porch?" He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. I was angry," he stammered. "I wasn't thinking." "Oh, I think you were," I said, leaning forward slightly. "You were thinking about how powerful it made you feel to have everything. The perfect house, the perfect wife, but they weren't yours, were they? The house was bought with my money, and the wife, well, you never really knew her at all." I felt a surge of strength I never knew I possessed. This was it. The moment I took my life back. David cleared his throat. "Here is our settlement offer," he said. "It's non-negotiable. Mr. Hayes will sign over the deed to the house free and clear to Chloe. He will sign over the title to the car he is driving, which was also purchased with her funds. He will relinquish any and all claims to any asset, present or future, derived from the initial fraud. He will walk away with his personal effects and nothing else. In exchange, Chloe will agree not to press criminal charges." Mark stared at the papers, his face pale. "Nothing," he whispered. I get nothing. What about all my work? My career was built on that image. The image you built with my money, I said, my voice like ice. You start over, just like you were forcing me to do, only you get to do it with a roof over your head and without the trauma. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost breathtaking. The mask was completely off. This was the real Mark. You'll regret this, Chloe, he hissed. I just smiled, a real, genuine smile, the first one in years. No, Mark, I said softly. I don't think I will. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the weak, pliable girl he married. But she was gone. Defeated, he slumped in his chair and picked up the pen. He signed every single paper, his movements jerky and angry. And just like that, it was over. The reversal was complete. I was free. I owned the house. I owned the car. I owned my life again. As we walked out of the office and into the bright sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. So, Eleanor said, squeezing my arm, what's the first thing you're going to do? I thought about her words from that night. Destroy it. I'm going to sell the house, I said without hesitation. I'm going to sell the car. I'm going to destroy every last piece of that life and use the rubble to build a new one. My grandma beamed, her eyes sparkling with pride. That's my girl, she said, and so began the heartwarming resolution. Selling the house was surprisingly easy. It was a beautiful property, and it sold quickly for more than Mark had paid for it. The day I signed the closing papers, I felt a profound sense of closure. I didn't even go back for a final walkthrough. I didn't need to. There was nothing there for me. With the money from the sale, and the rest of my trust fund now safely back under my control, I had a future. A blank canvas. For the first few months, I just healed. I stayed with my grandma in her beautiful apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city. I spent my days reading, walking in the park, and talking, really talking with my grandma. I told her about the loneliness, the little humiliations, the slow erosion of my soul. And she listened, offering not pity but wisdom. And then, one day, I felt the old familiar itch in my fingers, the urge to create. I went to the guest room where the boxes from the garage were neatly stacked. I opened the first one. The smell of oil paint and turpentine filled the air. It smelled like coming home. I set up an easel by the huge window overlooking the city. I put on some music, took a deep breath, and I started to paint. The first painting was a storm. It was all dark blues and angry grays, with a single, tiny light flickering on a distant porch. But as I kept painting, week after week, the colors started to change. The dark tones gave way to bright yellows, vibrant pinks, and hopeful blues. I was painting my way back to myself. I reconnected with my old friends from the art world. They welcomed me back with open arms, no questions asked. They just saw the new light in my eyes, the new confidence in my stride. I started showing my work at a small gallery downtown. My first piece sold in a week, then another. Then a gallery owner from a bigger, more prestigious gallery came to see my work. She offered me a solo show. I was stunned. It was everything I had ever dreamed of before Mark. The opening night of my show was a blur of happy faces, sparkling wine, and the low hum of conversation. My paintings were on the walls, big and bold and full of life, my story. My grandma was there, of course, looking impossibly chic and beaming at me. Your father would be so proud, Chloe, she said, her eyes misty. Your grandfather, too. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but this time it was pure joy. I had found my way back. I had taken the ugliest, most painful experience of my life and turned it into something beautiful. I had found my sunlit room, and I had built it myself. A few months after the show, I bought a loft apartment in the Arts District. It had huge factory windows, exposed brick walls, and more than enough space for a massive studio. It was messy and chaotic and filled with the smell of paint, and it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. I was my own person again, standing on my own 2 feet, more successful and happier than I had ever been. The pain of what Mark did was still there, a faint scar on my heart, but it no longer defined me. It was just a part of my story, a chapter that led to a much, much better one. I had my art, my friends, my grandma, and a future that was entirely my own. And they lived happily ever after with a big smile. My happily ever after wasn't a destination. It was a journey I started that day, with my grandma by my side and my paint-stained hands. The loft became my sanctuary. The first few months, I painted with a frantic energy, pouring every bit of my pain, my anger, and my eventual healing onto the canvas. The solo show was a massive success, leading to offers from galleries in New York and even London. I was no longer Chloe, the timid wife of a successful man. I was Chloe Vance, the artist. I had taken back not just my inheritance, but my name, my identity. It felt amazing. About a year after the settlement, I was at a charity art auction. My own work was up for bidding, a large, vibrant, abstract piece I'd titled After the Storm. I was standing in the back, just watching the crowd, when I felt a pair of eyes on me. I turned and my blood ran cold. It was Mark. I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. It was the first time I'd seen him since that conference room. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by clothes that didn't quite fit right. He had lost weight and his face had a gaunt, haunted look. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous, shifty energy. He wasn't a guest at the auction, he was working it. He was a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, I saw a flash of the old Mark, the anger, the resentment. Then it was gone, replaced by something else, shame. He looked away quickly, turning his back to me and hurrying toward the kitchen. He didn't want me to see him. He didn't want the world he once tried to own to see what he'd become. In that moment, I felt no anger, no hatred. I didn't even feel satisfaction. I just felt nothing. He was a stranger, a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to me. The hold he had on me was completely, utterly broken. He was just a sad man who had made terrible choices. I turned away and went back to watching the auction. A few minutes later, my painting came up. The bidding was fierce, climbing higher and higher. It eventually sold for a staggering amount, all of which was going to a foundation for women's shelters. As the auctioneer slammed the gavel down, the room erupted in applause. I smiled, a real, deep-down smile. That was my revenge. Not his failure, but my success. Not his misery, but my joy. Later that evening, a man came up to me. He had kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile. "Chloe Vance, I'm Leo. I just have to tell you, your piece, After the Storm," it was breathtaking. It felt hopeful. I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Thank you," I said. "That's what I was going for." We started talking. He wasn't a banker or a corporate big shot. He was an architect who specialized in designing public libraries and community centers. He talked about creating spaces that brought people together, and his eyes lit up with the same passion I felt when I talked about art. He didn't care about the price of my suit or the brand of my shoes. He asked about my inspiration, my technique, my passion. When I talked, he listened, really listened. It felt so different, so easy. Leo and I started dating. It was a slow, gentle courtship. He never pushed, never demanded. He celebrated my success as if it were his own. He would come to my messy loft and watch me paint for hours, not because he was bored, but because he was fascinated. "I love watching you create," he'd say. "It's like watching magic happen." He loved my free spirit, the very thing Mark had tried to crush. He loved my colorful clothes and my weird art world friends. He loved me for exactly who I was. He wasn't intimidated by my success or my inheritance. He was proud of me. He was steady and kind, but his strength wasn't in control or dominance. It was in his quiet confidence and his unwavering support. One day, he came to my studio with a huge, rolled-up blueprint. He spread it out on the floor. It was the design for a beautiful, modern beach house with a massive studio that had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. "I was just sketching," he said, looking a little shy. "I was thinking one day we could build a place filled with nothing but sunlight, for you and your canvases." I looked at the drawing, and then I looked at him. The words were almost the same as the ones Mark had once used, but the meaning was entirely different. Mark's promise had been a cage. Leo was an invitation. I started to cry, and he immediately looked panicked. "Oh my God, you hate it. I'm so sorry I overstepped." I cut him off by throwing my arms around his neck and kissing him. "I love it," I whispered against his lips. "And I love you." 2 years after I stood shivering on that porch, I stood on a sun-drenched beach with the sound of the ocean behind me. I was wearing a simple, elegant white dress. My grandma, Leaner, looking radiant, stood on one side of me. Leo, my kind, wonderful Leo, stood on the other, holding my hands. We were surrounded by a small group of our closest friends and family. There were no cameras, no pretense, no show, just love, pure and simple. My grandma gave a toast at our small reception. She raised her glass, her eyes twinkling. "To Chloe," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "who went through the storm and didn't just learn to dance in the rain. She learned to paint with all the colors of the rainbow it left behind." Today, I wake up every morning in our beautiful beach house. I walk into my sunlit studio, look out at the ocean, and I feel a sense of peace that I once thought was impossible. My life isn't a fairy tale. It's better. It's real. It's a life I built myself from the wreckage of a past I thought had destroyed me. I found love, not with a prince who rescued me, but with a partner who walked beside me. I found success, not by being someone's perfect accessory, but by embracing my own messy, colorful, wonderful self. And every now and then, when a storm rolls in off the ocean, I don't shiver. I don't hide. I open the door, take a deep breath of the rain-soaked air, and I smile. Because I know that no matter how dark the storm, the sun will always, always come out again. And they lived happily ever after, with a big smile.